My name is Ishant. So now we're gonna start off with something known as module number 1, Introduction to Java. So these are the 14 different modules. The left hand side, module number 1 to 7, they cover the standard edition of Java. When I talk about Java, Java has these three editions. Java Standard Edition. So many a time people in the market they call it as Core Java. So this is used so that you can write some desktop based applications. Then we got Enterprise Edition. People in the market they call it like advanced section of Java. But this advanced Java is not to write some desktop apps. So this guy is used to write web apps. Last is your mobile edition. Long way back, if you would have seen some phones, the time the feature phones were invented in the market, the colored phones, not the touchscreen ones. So the games which we used to play or some applications which we used to open, they would say powered by Java. So that's what we got as in mobile edition. But this is not there in the market anymore, not used in market. The reason is very much clear. We got Android, iOS coming into the action somehow. We're gonna cover something known as the standard edition of Java from module number 1 to module number 7. And then from module number 8 to module number 14, we're gonna cover the enterprise edition of Java. We're gonna understand what is Java, what are the advantages of Java, where Java can be used, and what is meant by memory management in Java. We'll also try to come up and create a Hello World project in Eclipse and we'll try to execute it off. This is the module number 1, which is Introduction to Java. So let's meet this guy, John. John will be the hero. So he's gonna be the main actor for your entire course curriculum. So John is a computer science student with California University and he aims to become a programmer like his elder brother. So his elder brother already works in some company over there. So John is learning about programming languages and one day in class, so professor was telling that there are many programming languages like C, C++, Ruby, Python and Java. And it's important to learn Java and we should know about Java. So he has a query that there are many programming languages, why we should be focusing on Java now. So Java is highly secure, object-oriented, and most widely used language in the industry. So John gets a little bit of technical answer, not much into the lines where he can understand. So a bit of bookish answer he gets. So he says that where do we use it and why should we learn Java? So that's what the question is. So we do understand that Java might be having some of the features, but where we use it and why we learn it. John was annoyed in the class and come back home and he was a bit upset. He had this query in his head that why and where we're gonna come up with Java. So meanwhile, his elder brother asks him that how was his day. So my teacher started programming languages today and he told us that we should learn Java since it's important. But I'm unable to understand that why we should learn Java. So elder brother says that he's right. So Java is quite important and it's used everywhere. So he says that can you tell me where exactly the language Java is used? So elder brother says that let me take you to the places where Java is used now. Let's see where we have uses of Java. So the television, they have set-top boxes along with it. So the set-top boxes, they have their firmwares and the applications. So they are all Java based. So that's where you can see the Java. So the GPS systems within our vehicles, they are again the navigation tools which works on Java. We also have grocery shops where we can see the billing machines. They are again based on Java. So we are not saying that every grocery shop or every navigation system or every set-top box is based on Java, but many of these, they rely on Java. Then John is pretty much convinced now that we got Java here and there and now he has some interest in coming up and learning this Java and want to become a good programmer. So meanwhile at home, the elder brother brings in a phone for John. So he says that it's an Android phone, also works on Java now. We understood that there are a lot of places where Java is in action So what exactly the term Java is? Technically, Java is a programming language. So when I talk the term language, language is one medium by which we exchange our thoughts. So as of now, we are exchanging our thoughts. So I'm speaking in a language known as English where we are able to exchange our thoughts. So in a similar way, you talk about programming language as one language with which you want to exchange your thoughts with your machine somehow. You want your machine to perform some task. Programming language is a high level language. Unlike any languages in the world, this programming language is used to interact. So we're gonna interact with machines. So when I say machines, talking about something known as control unit. So control unit is nothing, it's your CPU more or less processor. Programming language is a high level language. So when I say high level language, it means it's easy for a human to understand and to write a program with. So using the programming languages, I'm gonna come up with something known as software. And software is something which will run on operating system. So that is really important to understand why we use programming language. Programming language is the one with which you can come up with a software. Software or an application. So that's like how we got the different terms. So we are supposed to understand with the programming language, you're going to come up with a software. Software is also known as an application or an app in this world. So they run on operating system. For example, in my OS, if you can see, all these are nothing. These are the softwares, and they are also known as applications or apps in this world. So they runs on the operating system. So coming back now, Java as a programming language is used to write the softwares where the language focuses on some of the key features. Number one, it is concurrent. It means that we can come up with something known as threads in Java where we can execute multiple tasks together. For example, concurrency means within the same Google Chrome, you can open down the multiple tabs and you can perform some parallel tasks, and which leads to concurrency. So Java is object-oriented programming language and is class-based. So every program in Java, we need to write a class. So we'll understand what is the term class and what is the term object in much of the detail. So Java is specifically designed to have as few implementation dependencies as possible. It means that we got some predefined code structures available in Java which we can use so that our development time is reduced now. So you need not to write everything from the scratch. So Java has so many different APIs from where you can come up with a very beautiful application now. Where is Java used now? So Java is used in various enterprise level apps. You can also write down the frameworks, and it's used all around the world very widely. So over 850 million pieces, they run on Java runtime environment. So we can use Java to write Android apps, Hadoop apps. We can also use Java to come up and write some business process management tools. Thereafter, we can also develop some servers using the Java. So Hadoop, Android, Spring, Hibernate, Struts, these are some of the big frameworks which are written in Java itself, and you can code in Java and you can get into these fields somehow. So what is the demand and experience trends in the market? So in the market also, we have seen a great requirement for Java people. So more the experience, more the demand in the industry. So 5+ years of experience. So we got a very great demand in the market. Other than that, Java developer, then Java consultant, analyst, leads, programmers, architects, and engineers. So we got various designations coming in where the Java people are required in the market. And talking about the trends in the industry, so J2E technologies, so they have the highest portion across the world compared to the other technologies now. So that's like some industrial trends in the market. So it's not now that Java was the first programming language in the world somehow. So there are many predominant and very great programming languages available before Java. So we got C, C++, VB and Python to name few. Java is not something which came up before Python or VB. It came up after them. So primary goal of your Java as a programming language was to come up as a replacement to C++. But even though it's not that kind of a goal, and now so we call them the native languages, and they have their own kind of charm in the market now. What's the history of Java now? Java was developed by James Gosling. So this is the guy behind Java. So James Gosling used to work with Sun Microsystems. So Java is a platform independent programming language. What is meant by the term platform independence? The term platform independence over here means that Java runs on many operating systems. So it can run on multiple operating systems now. So that's what the term we got as in platform independent. So platform means the operating system now. So Java was initially named as Oak. So before the Oak, it was known as Green, then the Oak, and then finally they came up with the term Java. So Java is also, name of an island in Indonesia. So where the world's first coffee bean was discovered. Java has a dictionary meaning as coffee bean, and we got the logo of Java also as cup of coffee somehow. We got various versions of Java available in the market. So we got from 1 to the 8. So we have a JDK, Java Development Kit, which you need to install so that you can code well. And for any version of Java, you can go to your terminal or your command prompt. In your Windows, you can go to command prompt. On your Linux, you can come up to the terminal and you can just say Java -version and hit enter. You will be able to get the version of your Java. So what is the version of Java which is running on your operating system? You can get that part. These are some prime important versions of Java. Now we will come up with the features of Java. So the very first feature is that Java is very simple now. So the guy says that I'm tired of using C and C++. So what's the reason? So they are platform dependent. So if a code is developed by Windows, it must be executed in Windows only. This is what we got the problem with C, C++. So the native languages, they have this concern that the code written is platform dependent. So Java is one such language in the world which is platform independent. So that's one key feature which outshines Java from any other programming language in the world now. So let us see what happens over the C++ program. Now we're gonna come up and discuss something known as compilation flow of softwares. Let us say I want to come up with some orange juice. So I need first of all the oranges. So what oranges are? So they're gonna come up and they're gonna make it as a source. So orange is your raw material which you need to process now. So how these oranges will be processed? So you must have something known as a juicer. So juicer's gonna take the input as oranges and thereafter it's gonna come and produce the liquid. So you will be getting something known as a liquid. So what is this? This is something which is expected by us. So oranges, we put them into the juicer and you get the liquid juice. So this is the liquid juice which you are expecting. But this liquid juice we cannot drink as such, right? You need to pack it. So whatever this juice is, so it should be packed up. So we're gonna pack it. Once you pack it, you will be able to pack it in some container. You put it within the glass. So now this is the real end product. So we must understand, we got a container which contains the juice. So you can't have the liquid directly from the juicer somehow. So you need to pack it in a very beautiful glass so that you can drink it easily. Now the point is, for this analogy, we got how to come up and write one software. this glass of juice will be consumed by me. So coming back, we got something known as programming language. So I'm gonna talk about programming language first of all as C++. Let's say you write some program and you save this program as myprogram.cpp. This is known as the source code. We also call it as high level language. So what exactly this guy is? This is the source code. We call it a high level language, and myprogram.cpp over here, if you can see, is written by us. So this is something which is understandable by us but not by your computer. So what we do, we process it. In order to process it, we use a guy known as compiler. So the way we got this guy known as juicer, in a similar way we got this guy known as compiler now. So what compiler will do? So compiler will process the source. How it's gonna process? It's gonna process by checking out some spellings and some syntax in your code. So what is meant by spelling and syntax? Spelling means that you haven't misspelled any of the keyword or any of the dictionary word of the programming language, or syntax means any grammatical part now. So you need to put the semicolon in the end of your instruction. So that's like your basic syntactical part now. So thereafter your compiler will generate the juice now, and this generation will result into some intermediate code. So we call this intermediate code as binary code. So every programming language, once it is compiled, you get something known as binary code or an intermediate code. Now this is the real juice which is required. But now this juice, you can't drink it as such, so you need to pack it. And what you do, you pack it like myprogram.exe. Call this as executable code. So this is that program. You can say it's a container which contains binary. So what is binary? So binary is this intermediate code. We can consume this guy. So this is your end product, and we call this guy as a software which can be consumed by the operating system. So what is this myprogram.exe? Myprogram.exe can be consumed by operating system. So we created this container, this glass which contains the juice made by the juicer, which your OS will now drink. So what's gonna happen over here now? Your OS gonna consume it. We must understand, let's say that I'm gonna drink the juice. I have one of my friend now. So he says that I don't want the juice in a glass. So I want a juice in some disposable glass or in some any other glass. There might be a couple of my friends who would not like to drink the juice in a regular glass. So they want it in some disposable glass or any other glass, right? So that's like the requirement now. It means that, so the guy who is, coming up with the juice, so he has to pack the juice in different glasses. Now this is the same problem which is faced within our native languages like C++. So OS like Windows wants the juice in exe, Mac wants the juice in DMG, whereas Linux wants the juice in some SH. So every different operating system, they have their own different ways of juices now. So exe is packed with some different concept. So you don't get the exe directly. So you need to come up with the intermediate code, the binary code. So exe, it is just a container which contains binary. So for every different operating system, we got different kind of a glass or a container, but it's gonna contain the similar kind of the juice. Now there might be a scenario where Windows, it's gonna say that I want the juice from oranges. Mac can say I want the juice for carrots. I want the juice for some other fruit, which can be by Linux now. So depends upon your source as well. So what's the kind of juice we're gonna come up with? So various languages, they are the different kind of sources now, and the process for every language, it's gonna remain the same. So the problem is not the juice. Problem is packing the juice in different containers for different operating systems. So if you can see, C++ is platform dependent. So every source, once you get the end product, so compiler will not generate the end product, compiler will just generate the juice. So every operating system would require a different extension. It means it's one bigger side of a challenge for the industry to pack up the juices. Now, what's the case of Java? In case of Java, we got some similar concepts. So we got the source as myprogram.java and you get myprogram.class. So the good news is you don't pack. Dot class or the real binary or the juice is not packed into any container. So we don't pack the juice in any container out here. So what's happening over here? We are giving this juice to a guy known as Java Virtual Machine. So this is one new term. We call it like Java Virtual Machine. Let us understand this flow once with one illustration. So I'm gonna come up with one graphical illustration. Let's see that part now. So let us understand that we got one operating system now. So I'm gonna consider that this is one operating system. So you can consider that this is Windows or any other operating system. So I'm using the generic word operating system. Just below the operating system, we got one hardware. So that's like, you can say that it's a control units or it's a CPU part. So I'm gonna say this guy is your control unit. Now I'm going to write a program on C++. So I'm gonna say myprogram.c++, which is the source. So we're gonna get myprogram.obj and then we'll get myprogram.exe. So this is what the flow is. So what is going to happen over here? So we will be generating this myprogram.cpp and then myprogram.exe. So this myprogram.exe is given as an input to the operating system. So what operating system will do? Operating system extracts the binary out of exe and converts it into machine codes. What OS is doing? OS is extracting the binary from this glass. So from exe, it's gonna read out the binary, that's like obj file, and then it's gonna convert it into the machine codes. And these machine codes, they are fed to the control unit and control unit will process the same. So this is how your native language C++ will come into action. What happens when you talk about a language like Java now? So in case of Java, we got the same story where we got the program as myprogram.java. Then you're gonna get myprogram.class. This is the only end product which we have. We have nothing more than this. So it means myprogram.java is compiled to get myprogram.class. Now the thing is, you don't give this juice to the operating system. Juice is shared with one more concept running on the operating system known as Java Virtual Machine. We got this guy as JVM. So JVM stands for Java Virtual Machine. So responsibility to generate the machine codes is not given to the operating system now. Who is generating the machine codes for your Java? So JVM is the one who is responsible for the same. You can see two different flows for the same operating system. And for Java, you don't come up with the end product. You directly give the juice to the JVM. And JVM will process this juice and converts it into the machine code. So what OS was doing is now done by the JVM. So how OS was doing? OS was extracting the juice out of the container first, whereas the juice is directly given to the JVM in case of Java. So till this phase, we call the environment as compile time environment. So this environment is compile time environment over here. And this time is known as the runtime environment. So applications for the native languages C, C++, their runtime environment is operating system. But in case of Java, the runtime environment is Java Virtual Machine. So runtime environment means when your program will be executed. Execution means your binary will be read by the JVM or by the OS, which will be processed by the control unit below the layers now. If you can see now, in case of your Java compiler will generate the intermediate code known as bytecode, and it is given to JVM. So the good news is JVM is available on all the major operating systems, and it is pre-installed by the vendor itself. We don't install the JVM. JVM comes pre-installed. It means even if we don't have your Java development kit, but you have your bytecode available with you, you can directly run it on your operating system. You just need the bytecode which can directly run on the operating systems. So this way Java is turned out into a platform independent concept. So what I'm trying to say is that you put this bytecode into a pen drive, you take it to some other operating system, and you just execute it over there, because JVM will be available in each and every operating system. So JVM will have these 3 tiers. So I'm just gonna come up with the tiers for the JVM. So how the JVM looks like, so let's see that part also. So for JVM, we got 3 major blocks. The first block is known as class loader. So where all the binary code is loaded. Then we got bytecode verifier. And lastly, we got something known as JIT compiler, interpreter as well. Both the things we have in JVM. This is what the JVM is. So JVM is given the input over here, which is passed down the line to the bytecode verifier, then to the JIT compiler. So that's how you're gonna pass and you get the output. So the input is the bytecode. So here you pass the input as the bytecode and you get the output as machine code. So this is the high level language which gets converted to the low level language, and then finally you convert it to machine language. So that's how your process or flow works. Moving ahead now, let us understand this JVM part. So this is known as Java Virtual Machine. If you can see this above block. So your bytecode is loaded into the class loader. So class loader is that unit of JVM which will load the bytecode. Then bytecode verifier will check for the security of this bytecode. So anyone who's gonna change the bytecode, your bytecode verifier will reject it. So we got some security algorithm which has been implemented as in private keys. Lastly, your bytecode will be forwarded to the JIT compiler or the interpreter, just in time compiler. Now your bytecode can either be compiled or it can be interpreted as well. So compiler and interpretation, so they are different in a way that compiler will compile all the bytecode at once, whereas interpreter gonna compile it line by line. So you will get the machine codes either all at once or line by line as an output. So this JVM is available on each and every platform. So since JVM is available on each and every platform, it makes your language Java as platform independent language. Java is simple. Java is written using C, C++. If you know C, C++, Java is really simple to understand. Next feature is that Java is quite secure. So while Java is secure, it's very easy to understand now. So if you consider this operating system as an ocean now, So all the applications, they are running on the operating systems. But Java apps, they don't run in this bigger ocean. They run in this small container, if you can see. So this is a protected shell in which your programs run. So this shell automatically gives more privacy. So no program which is running on the OS can interfere into the JVM now. So that's what we got as in a shell. Other than that, Java has no pointers. So you can't come up and indirectly access any memory with the help of Java program. Then Java is robust. So there might be a problem. We would have written some code which can give an error at runtime. So the errors can occur in your softwares when they are in action. So when a software is running, you might face an error. For an example, let's say I am connected to a projector and suddenly the power goes off, so projector will directly shut down. In this situation, what I can do, I can put up a UPS as a backup supply. So whenever the power goes off, projector will get an uninterrupted power supply. Robustness means to handle the errors at runtime. So we got exception handling mechanism in Java, which makes the Java program more robust. It means that programs will not crash at runtime, will handle the crashes in the programs at runtime. Then Java is portable. It means that since it's platform independent, so you get the bytecode generated from one OS and you put it to the other OS. So applications written in Java, they can be ported to different platforms somehow. So Java is dynamic. We got Java as an object-oriented programming structure. Java will help us to write the objects only at runtime. It means when your program will be executed, most of the operations in Java are carried out at the time of execution. So compilation phase versus the runtime phase. So dynamic keyword means the term runtime. Then we got distributed. It means you can write down web applications. You can come up with a client server model. Then we got multi-threading. What is meant by the term thread? So thread is known as a task in your program. So as of now, if you can see my window over here, so Google Chrome, we got these three different tabs. So I am doing different tasks in different windows. So you just consider these windows as three different tasks which are running in the same application known as Google Chrome. So within one Java application, you can perform multiple tasks. It means you can run some fundamentals parallelly at the same time. Then Java is object oriented. So everything in Java we consider as object. It supports all the OOPS features, that's like encapsulation, abstraction, polymorphism, and inheritance. So all these features are supported by Java. So Java is, we say that it has high performance. So bytecodes are designed to perform very fastly. So number one, we don't have the container, if you can see. We directly give the juice to JVM and you get the outcome. So that's how the Java is different in terms of performance. We got bytecodes getting executed fastly. What is a bytecode? Bytecode is one binary code which gets generated once we compile the code of Java. To compile the code of Java, the compiler is known as JavaC. So this is the compiler JavaC, and we'll be able to compile the code and we'll be getting the bytecode. And this bytecode which is generated is a platform independent concept. So why to come up with multi-threading? If you are going to come up with a multi-threading, so overall performance of the system will increase because you will be able to handle multiple tasks together. For example, Facebook. Images are retrieved in one thread, chat is happening in the other thread, notifications are retrieved in some other thread. So multiple tasks, they're gonna come up within the same application altogether. So Java bytecode is in the form of instructions that JVM will execute, and a Java programmer, you need not to understand the bytecode. This is the juice. You just need to know how to create this juice. So what exactly is there in the juice, so that we are not supposed to understand at this level. So JVM is one integral part for Java which will focus on running the bytecode and making the Java as platform independent language. So JVM will also handle the memory. So what's gonna be the memory management model? So that we'll understand soon. So let us understand Java memory management. We saw that JVM is an integral part to run the Java application. So we saw Java virtual machine. So let's say that in C++, so how do we get the memory managed? The user will use pointers to get the memory allocated. Let us say user 1 is going to allocate the memory, and user 2 is gonna come up and delete that memory. So for the user 1, the program might get crashed. With a pointer now, so there might be crashes in the program if it is not taken care with some proper logic. So there are no pointers in Java, so these all memory management issues will not exist in Java, because in case of Java, memory management is handled by the JVM itself. So you request for the memory, but you don't worry about deleting the memory. Java has all the objects or the data getting created into an area known as heap. So we know that when the program will be executed, it's gonna use the random access memory, the primary memory RAM of your computer. So any software which runs on the operating system, it's gonna consume the RAM. Within the RAM, you got this data structure heap in which JVM will manage its objects. This heap will be divided into two parts. One is the young space and the other one is the old space. So what happens now, when you write down some code snippet to get the memory, or you want to write, let's say, some small object in the memory, so a newly created object will be constructed in the young space, and thereafter, if it is not getting used, it's gonna get moved into the old space. The data available in the old space will be freed by a special guy or a special thread in the Java known as garbage collector. So garbage collector will keep on constantly looking for the objects which are not required anymore, and it's gonna destroy them off. All the newly allocated objects are created in the young space, and once the young space is full, then the garbage collector can be used so that we can release the memory. And if the object has lived for long in the young space, then it's gonna automatically move into the old space. Once the old space is full, garbage collector will release the space in the heap. So that's how we got JVM in action now. So JVM memory management model has these two spaces, young space and the old space within the RAM. So any object which we are going to come up with, so they're gonna get constructed in the heap. What is an object? We don't care about that as of now, but you can understand that the term object will be created in the RAM in the heap. So every object will have a reference to it. So we access the object through some references now. Objects and references in the memory. When the garbage collector is gonna run down, so it's gonna release your memory. So how JVM works now? We got two environments. One is the compile time environment, one is the runtime environment. In our compile time environment, we compile the Java source to the bytecode. And now this bytecode is moved into the runtime environment into the class loader. Class loader of your JVM will load the bytecode, and bytecode verifier will verify whether this bytecode is correct or not. Now this can either be interpreted or it can be compiled so that we can get the machine codes for the operating system where it's gonna give it to the hardware. So now let us try to understand what is meant by the term container. So container will contain data. What is meant by this term data now? Data is some piece of information. Why we need this data? So software needs data to be processed. So why software needs data to be processed? Software is a guy which is going to software solves a problem. So let us consider this software solves a problem by taking an example of Uber application. So what Uber does, Uber solves a problem by which you can get a cab easily. So what Uber needs now? Uber needs to process the data. So what kind of data? For example, you want to request a cab. So I need to input the details now. So you need to input what is your source, what is your destination, what is the kind of cab you are looking for, what kind of ride you want to take, whether it's a shared one or it's a regular one. So these are some input details which you're gonna give to your Uber application. So Uber is gonna process it and it's gonna give you one response that cab is allocated to you based on your inputs. So software needs data to be processed so that it can solve a problem. This is one of the prime important role of your software, that it's gonna come up with something known as data. So it means that the most important and centralized part of software around which the whole software is gonna work is what it is, data. So data can be contained in a container. So now we got various containers to contain data. We got single value containers. We got multi-value containers. So single value containers can contain only one single value. Multi-value containers, they will contain various data. So single value container, we come up with something known as primitives. Multi-value container, we come up with arrays and objects. These are the multi-value containers. Let us understand what is meant by the term single value container and the term primitives. So when we see this statement int I assign 10 written in a programming language, so we say I is a single value container, 10 is a value, or I can say it's basically the data, and int is a data type which defines type of container. What is the type of container? So I is a single value container, so I cannot contain more than one values. You cannot say that I'm supposed to come up with an instruction where I can say int I is 10, 20, 30. So this is now not supported. So I can support only single value. I cannot support multiple values. Now the term data type is one of the important concepts which defines the type of container now. If you talk about Java now, so Java has these four primitive data types. So we got integer, float, character and boolean. So integer further has byte, long, short and int. So the difference is that they're gonna come up in the memory. Byte takes 8 bits, that's like 1 byte of the memory, whereas short's gonna take 2 bytes, int gonna take 4 bytes and long will take 8 bytes. So if you have to store the age of a person, you should only go for the byte. So the integral data can be stored in a data type which can be either byte, short, int or long. So let's say age. So you say byte age is 20. So age cannot go more than the range of 256. It's not possible that you come up with some human age to be more than 256. So you can just take the data type byte so that you can save the memory now. So why we have various different types available, so that you can choose wisely and you can save your memory. So floating points, they also come up with two different containers. One for the 4 bytes, one for the 8 bytes. Again, the range is one bigger issue. They work on some decimal values. You can say float f assign 2.2f. So this f we have to put explicitly, but for the guy double d you can write 2.2 as such. So over here, if you can see, float defines the guy f to store the value in some decimals, whereas this guy byte, int, long or short, so they tell us to store the data as an integral part. So other than that, we can also store the character data using the char part. So any character on your keyboard can be used to store the data. Then we got Boolean, which takes single byte and 1 bit, which means either true or false. So that's like primitive types in Java now. Why do we need different data types when we can use only single type? We come with different types so that we can save our memory. We can come up and we can write some memory efficient programs. Making your age for the person to come up in integer will not make that sense. Why to waste memory? Why not to save the memory? Every data can be processed with some operations now. So we got these data operations coming into the action on your Java as a programming language. So we got arithmetic operators, unary operators, relational operators, and logical operators. Let's say Ola has to, or Uber has to measure the distance traveled from the source to the destination. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna add the kilometers or the miles which the passenger or the rider is traveling. So we can perform some operations over the data types. So arithmetic operators, they are all mathematical operations. Plus, minus, multiply, divide, and the remainder. Plus, plus, and minus, minus, they're gonna increment and decrement the value by 1. Relational operators, they're gonna compare the quantities now. So whether the distance is greater than 4 miles or 4 kilometers, then start charging the user. Else don't charge the user. So adjust the fare in the minimum chargeable fare. So that's the kind of relational operators which we are talking about. So equal to, not equal to. Then we got logical operators. So and, or not. For example, I want to request the Uber app. Now there's a condition. So the condition says that it should be a shared cab and I want 2 riders within my ride. So I'm gonna request for a shared app and with the passenger's number as, so that's like the and condition. So there can be or condition. I want either a shared cab or a regular cab. So there also can be a not condition. So not condition where you are negating, you are making true to false and false to true. That's like the basic introduction to the data types and operations available in Java. So we'll be using them in our codes when we'll be start writing the code. So what you need to do, you need to update your machines with the Java now. You need to install JDK. Now JDK is not JVM. JDK means you gonna have some set of source code which you can use in your source code. So JDK will give you the code snippets. They are all predefined code snippets which you can use now. JDK can be downloaded from the link. So try to download the latest versions of JDK. So this is what is recommended. So JDK 8 is the latest version which you should be downloading. After the JDK is downloaded, you need to set the path of the JDK also. Then you can download the Eclipse. So this is what we got, the URL, download the Eclipse. So Eclipse is one software, one integrated development environment in which we will be writing our software. So we'll be developing the code in Eclipse itself. These two softwares you need to download, keeping in mind either you are using 64-bit OS or 32-bit OS. So according to your machine, you need to download your softwares and you need to be geared up so that you can code. Let us have an introduction to Eclipse and Java. So for Java, once you are done with the installation, you set up the path. So you can run these commands like Java over the terminal and Javac. So Java and Javac over the terminal or the command prompt, they will give you various options. So if they are giving you the options, it means Java is on your system. Or you can just say Java-version to check Java is there. You can also check for Java C hyphen version. So Java and Java C are two different guys. So Java C is the compiler, Java is the interpreter. So that's how you got Java and Java C. Now what is Eclipse? So I'm just gonna move down to a location where I have the Eclipse. This is known as Eclipse. So you'll get the setup, and once you need to double click your file, so your Eclipse will be started off. So the moment Eclipse is started, it's gonna ask you one workspace. For example, I'm gonna mark this workspace as Edureka. So let's say 13th of Feb. So this is one folder which will be created under this path, if you can see. So just hit OK. Now the Eclipse will be loaded for us. You will be getting this welcome page. You can close it off, and this is what you got as in Eclipse. So you can see now, so this is one path. I got this workspace Edureka 13th February. This is one folder Edureka 13th Feb which has been created. So how to create a Java project? You say file, new Java project. So once you say file, new Java project, this Java project wizard will open, and now I need to give the name. So I'm gonna name it like session 1. You say next, and then you say finish. But before I say finish, so you can see session 1 contains one SRC and one bin. You say finish now. Come back, you can see a session 1 folder. Within the session 1 folder, you got these 3 hidden folders, so we don't care about them. So bin and SRC are 2 folders which are empty as of now. So bin is not the dustbin or the trash. So bin stands for binary. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna parallelly open my session 1 here. On SRC, I'll do a right click and I'll say a new class. You started your Eclipse, you went to the file, and then you said a new Java project. Then you say SRC, right click, a new class. So this class name, you can keep any name of your choice. For example, I'm gonna say my program, and then I'm gonna select this guy public static void main with the string arguments, and then you say finish. This is your very first Java program. So if you can see, this source code came up automatically for you with some comment over here. I can delete this. So this is the source code. If you come down now, you can see .java file created in the SRC, and the juice is automatically coming up in this bin, myprogram.class. Let me just increase the font size. This is your first program, and whatever you need to do in the main over here. So what is public class my program, what is public static void main will come up later. For the time being, just say system and a dot. So when I say dot, it says enable intelligent code completion. I'll select that part, then say out, and then say a print. So you say a print of hello world. You can see this green button run. You run the code, and you can get to see the output as hello world. Very basic introduction to Eclipse. So let us say I'm gonna come up with some numbers like A is 10 and B is 20, and I'm gonna say C as A plus B. So you say hello world, and then you say plus C, which means along with the hello world, print the value of C. So I'm gonna append the value of C. So now you see hello world, and you see the value of C coming up to be as 30. So this is one very small introduction to your Eclipse. If you come up and write some more classes over here, so you can find that you're having one source code, but you get the byte code for every class you make in your source code. So that's what the learning for the day. So once you come up with the Java program, any number of classes you will write in your program, you will get the same number of byte codes within your bin directory. So we got 2 important concepts in Java. The very first one is JDK, which means Java Development Kit. So JDK will also install one more thing known as JRE, Java Runtime Environment. So what and all these two guys are? So JDK contains all these definitions. So contains definitions for predefined. If you can see system.out.print, we don't know what is. So this is already written in the language. So this comes as a part of JDK now. JRE will help to run the program on JVM. So JRE is that structure available to us which is going to help to run the program on the Java virtual machine. Your Eclipse, you're gonna start it off, right? And then you're gonna come up to file, new Java project. You give the name to a project and then you create a new class. You select this option, public static void main, and then you can write down your first program as hello world. So you can directly click the run button, or you can also use the shortcut known as Control F11 to execute your code. Now there is something known as public static void main and string args. So we'll understand now what is meant by public static void main string arguments. This is the execution point. You can say this is the execution context of your program. So whatever the program you write, so program execution begins from main. So this is the execution context of your program. Program will begin from main. Whatever the instructions you are writing in the main, for example, I'm gonna say CISO and control spacebar. I say SYSO and control spacebar. So I get this system.out.println. So I'll say main started, and in the end I'll say main finished. So these are some instructions of your program which will be executed in a sequence now. So when you run the program, you find that the first statement which you get is main started and the last statement which you get is main finished. So print means to print in the same line, whereas print ln means to print in a new line. Print means to print a character. So print versus println, there are two things now. Public means that this guy main is accessible globally, right? So this is one access modifier. What exactly the public is? So it provides the visibility of the main to some external world now. So that's how you're gonna treat it. Void is known as a return type or an acknowledgement of the main. So what happened when the main will be executed? You will come to know nothing. Then main is a function. Function is also known as a method or a procedure which Java virtual machine will execute, and these are known as inputs to the main in the form of a string array. Then static keyword means that this guy main can be accessed without any object. Public will be covered in future, static will be covered in future. What is a method? That will also cover in future. What is void? How a method will have an acknowledgement or a return type or inputs. Again, everything has to be covered in the future. So we are just understanding this guy is some access modifier which provides the visibility. This means that we need no objects. This is the return type. This is the method name. These are the inputs to the method. So just one very basic introduction to the definitions part, not with the understanding part. So that is what we have done. Alright, so this is one small program how we can add the two numbers. So now we're gonna come up with what is meant by choices in real life. So this is like husband and wife now. So honey, can we go for a movie today evening? The wife asked the husband. So only if I come back from office at 5, or else we shall go tomorrow. Now this is what we got, the choices or the conditions coming into the action, where we use if and else. So if the condition is met, so we can proceed, else we can proceed in some different direction now. So if and else is one of the most primary conditional construct used in the programming languages. So let us understand how you can come up with the if conditions. In your program, you can just mention an if part with some condition, then the body of the if will be executed in case this condition returns true. For example, if balance is greater than 0, we are saying let the withdraw be true. Let us try to see one program as well. So this is a program with if and else together. So if condition is true, body will be executed. For the if else, the body of else will be executed. Let us see if and else example so that we can demonstrate the concept. Let's write a new Java project. So how I'm gonna do? I'm gonna say file, new Java project. So the name of the Java project as of now I'm gonna mention as session 2. You say next. So we got one folder as src, one folder as bin. Src contains the source code, whereas bin will contain the binary code. That's like your bytecode. And then say finish. So here we are with the code snippet already written for us. Coming to the main, we're gonna declare one variable a who is 10 and one variable b who is 20. So you can just keep a cross check that if a is greater than b. So we are checking who is the largest over here. So if a greater than b, you say CISO a is greatest. Along with it, I'm gonna print the value of a. So the else part, I'm gonna say CISO b is greatest. So it's what we have written as in not the program, but the very English part, the very high level language part to understand what exactly this is. There is a number A, there's a number B. You are comparing the numbers. In case A greater than B, will execute the if part, else your else body will be executed. So as of now, your else part has to be executed. You run the code, you get this output now. There can be various other kind of conditions. For example, I'm going to take up this variable known as boolean, and the name of this variable is withdraw, which is by default false. So I've taken up this variable withdraw, which is by default false. So I'll say one more variable which is like balance, and the value of the balance is, let us say, 10,000. So I'll say if the balance is greater than 5,000, you assign the variable withdraw the value true. So you can also come up with only if part. You need not to come up with the else part. That is also possible. So else is required when you need to follow some separate path now. So here if you can see, by default withdraw is false. So if the value is greater than 5,000, I'm just saying withdraw to go true. So I need not to come up and say this else part and come up with this guy withdraw assign false over here. Because by default it is exactly what false. So you need not to come up with the else part. So it depends now how we are going to construct the code. Based on that, you choose the corresponding flow and process. There might be a situation when you want to come up and you want to say, let's compare three numbers now. We got A, B, and C now. So what I'm going to do, since you are coming with the single instruction within the if else, so you need not to come up and create the body for these guys like this. So you can come up and you can write it as such. Let us see if you want to compare three numbers. So let's say if A greater than B, then you nest down and you say if A greater than C. Now you see if contains more than one instruction. So here the body of if was having only single instruction. So when the if is having a single instruction, you need not to create the body part, but body is required when you have more than one instruction. Here I'll just say CISO A is greatest, and in the else part we get something known as C is greatest. We have compared three numbers, and this concept is known as nested if else. So this is a regular if else, only if we call it the nested if else. So what happens in case of nested if else, you keep on adding the if else within the if else. So there can be many choices now. In my else part, I will be comparing. It means that A is not greater than B. So B is greater. So I'll just keep a check on B greater than C then. So if B is greater than C, then B is the greatest, else C is the greatest. You run the code, you see that now it says C is greatest. And if you wish, you can also come down and you can say CISO withdraw is plus the value of withdraw. Nested if else will work when you want the condition having a further condition. Let's say there is a Boolean variable known as network, or let's say data, which is true. So we got one Boolean variable data which is true and GPS as true. So we got these two variables, data and GPS. I can say if data. So if data and if GPS, I'll say CISO, you can use maps. So this is one condition where we actually need to test the multiple conditions. If the data is there and if the GPS is there. So if data is not there, you can come up and you can say the user, so please enable internet connection. If the GPS is not enabled, you can tell the user, please enable GPS. So this is what we got as in nested if else, where we can come down and we can check for some multiple conditions. These nested if else concepts, so you can also come up and replace if data and GPS. You can come up and you can together check one condition in this way, and in the else part what you can say, please check internet connection or and GPS. So what we are understanding from here, this guy and operator, the logical operator within the if condition, these two flags together. So rather than coming up with the nesting of the ifs, I can check both the conditions here. So I can pass whether this is an and condition or this has to be some or condition. So either both should be true or one should be true. So we can manage that part also. So moving ahead with this concept over here, these are the Boolean variables. So true will give you the true. So if we got true and false, it's not gonna come up with the if, but it's gonna come up with the else part. So even here, if you can see, please enable GPS. What is next now? So the next is you can also write down conditions coming up in a ladder like this. Right? There can be a scenario that you need to come up and you need to create a ladder of if else. What is meant by ladder of if else? Let us say the value of the marks is 65. So if marks is greater than 80, it's greater than or equal to 80. So you put this condition greater than or equal to 80. So you say CISO grade A. So they lie in the range of greater than and equal to 70, but your marks, they are less than 80. So let us say the grade assigned is B. At the same time, let us say your marks greater than and equal to 60 and they are less than of 70. We're gonna come down and we're gonna give you the C grade, else we'll just say that you have failed. What is happening over here? So we are checking the conditions in the ladder. It means that if this fails, then come down and check for this. Finally, if nothing matches, you give the user the last output in the else part. So this is known as the ladder if else. So we got these conditional constructs coming in Java, where we can write some programs based on some conditions. So moving ahead, we also have something known as repetitive tasks in real life. What is meant by this term, a repetitive task? So let us come down and see. So we also have something known as switch case in Java. So what is meant by this term switch case? It means that, let us say int input. So I'm gonna say input as 100. So let us say int item code as 100. So I'm gonna come up with some switch case. So I'm gonna say switch to item code. So let us say if the case is 100, then you can say this is the item is shirt. In case goes like 200, item is jeans. If it is somewhere around 300, then let us say this guy is I'm gonna come down and I'm gonna write that no item available. So we can also use a fundamental of switch case where we can replace our ladder if else concept. In case of ladder if else, there is one loophole now. So let us say marks are 55. It means all these conditions will be checked and then this else will come into action. It means execution procedure over here. If you see the execution procedure now, it's gonna execute the else part. So it means the program went through all these conditions. In case of switch case, what happens, whatever the number is, the corresponding case will be executed. No other case will be executed. So let us say if the value of case is 200, only the guy 200 will be executed, not any other guy. And we're gonna break down the control here only. So the control will be broken. It will not allow us to execute the below code. So now if you see the switch case output, so the 200, it says the jeans. Switch case is also one more conditional construct available in Java. So I just wanted to come up with it. So we also have something known as switch case. So now let us come and understand what is meant by repetitive tasks in real life. So many times what will happen, you would like to repeat the similar task again and again. John is facing one problem. So this is annoying that he needs to take 100 printouts in 10 minutes and he has to wait there and press the button every time it prints, right? So let's say John has to take 100 printouts of one document. So he is now pressing that button every time to get a new printout. Instead of programming the printer every time, we can program the printer for 100 printouts and it can loop the process for 100 times. It's very easy that rather than coming out and pressing the button 100 times, you can program your printer to print for the 100 times. So a loop is a repetition of certain statements that can be executed multiple number of times depending upon our condition. So if you have a situation where you need to come up and you need to write a program where your executions are supposed to be repeated in a multiple fashion, then you can use the loop. Let us take some practical example now. I want to come up and I want to see how many rides I have taken in the Uber app, right? So there will be one loop which will retrieve all the rides from the very first till the end. Or if I want to go to my Amazon account and I would like to explore what and all products I have purchased, you will see a list of products, but every time there are some different values, but the fundamental remains the same. So that's like repetition now. So there are 13 items which I have purchased from the Amazon. So Amazon's gonna repeat the same code 13 times, but it's gonna keep on replacing the image, titles, and the prices. But fundamentally, the structure is gonna remain the same. So I'm gonna say src, right click, and a new class. So this time I'm gonna name it as loop demo with the main method. So I got two source codes, both having the main methods. So loop demo class having this main method where I'll execute a demonstration on loop now. So let us say we got this guy known as number, which is 5, and I got one variable I whose value is 1. So I want to write the table of this guy 5. So how I will write the table? I will say C. So I will say num plus i's. Just have a look how I'm concatenating the things. Num i's are num into I. So when I say num i's are num into I, it means 5 ones are 5 into 1. So if I write this instruction again, and after this instruction I just say I is now 2. So thereafter I'll come down and I say I is 3 now. So you can see I am trying to do some similar task again and again, and I'm starting to get this output of a table now, if you can see. So let me just put some space over here. You run the code, you find this output, so the table of a number 5. We know that here the statements are getting repeated again and again. So what I can do, I can use the loop. So this is the kind of a situation where you need to come up with the loop. So in Java, we got 3 types of loops. We got while loop, do while loop, and for loop. So there are 3 loops, 3 types of iterations. So fundamentally, their main aim is to come up and do the same concept, that's like execute the instructions n number of times. So while and for, they're gonna work exactly in the same way, but they are different in syntax. So for and while, they work in the same way, but they are different in syntax. Do while work different from while and for. So what can be the advantage of using the loops? We can use loops so that we can write the code less. So we can reduce the code repetition. We can just put up a loop and developers' efforts gonna be reduced. So let us see how this for loop will work. The loop for will work with some initial point, if you can see initialization, then some condition, and then some expression. So loop's gonna start, it's gonna check for the condition. If condition is true, it's gonna execute the statements, and then you must use some increment or decrement. Then again the condition will be checked. Until this condition is not false, the loop will keep on executing. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just comment out these instructions. So we need not to write in this fashion. What you do, you say for int of j assign 1, j less than equal to 10, and j plus plus. So I have taken up one variable j. This is the property of the for loop. You declare the variable within the loop itself with the initial point. So what we got the for loop with the initial point, then ending point, and then expression to reach from initial point to ending point. This we must understand what we have done over here. So for loop is taking one initial point, one ending point, and some way through which you can navigate from initial point to ending point. So j plus plus means keep on increment the value of j by 1. So initially the value of j is 1. 1 is less than or equal to 10. So whatever I'm gonna come up in my body, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna say num time j's are num into j. So this is what we're gonna execute. And now once this body is executed, the value of j will be incremented from 1 to 2. Now again condition will be checked, 2 less than equal to 10, then the value of j will be 2, then we'll increment the value of j to 3, then 4, then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. But the moment j goes 11, 11 is not less than or equal to 10, this loop will break. So now you run the code and you find your for loop in action. This is the output of your for loop. So I'll just write this for loop over here. So you can see this demonstration of your for loop. So just like the for loop, we also have the other guy known as while loop. So while works in a different syntax. For example, I'll just come down and I'll say while I is less than or equal to 10. So you can't declare the variable the way you were declaring it in the for. You need to declare it outside. And then you come down and you write your instruction the way you are writing in the for loop, but this guy increment or any decrement or any expression which takes us from the source to the destination, you need to manage it internally. So you can see the difference between for and while now. So what I'll do, I'll just say the number goes 7 over here. I'm changing the value of number before you execute the while loop. So you now see that while loop is coming up in the same way the for loop was coming. Fundamentally, syntactically, they are different now. In a way, the condition will only be specified in the while. You can't specify so much different fundamentals in your while loop. Increment part goes within the definition. Variable declaration of the starting point goes outside the loop. So what is the condition, only that is specified in the while loop. the while loop over here only work by taking the input as condition. So it's gonna keep on execute the condition until this statement is true. So last kind of loop is do while. So do while will execute statements first and then check the condition. Thank you very much.